Welcome back, everybody, to the Degenerates. We are here in Houston, having a wonderful conversation with my new friend here, Eric Ibarra, founder of the Magnolia Fund. Super excited to have this conversation because it pertains specifically to the place that I grew up, my childhood, our childhood, everybody involved in the Degenerates. So it's equal parts nostalgic and then important, and like I've said on this channel before, that our lives, our skin color, our perspective is inherently political. So I think we're gonna end up weaving through a lot of concepts and a lot of wonderful and also tragic moments of like what it means to, find yourself in a place where you feel like you belong, but then like realizing yourself outside of that place and in the world at large. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. Eric, introduce yourself, man.
Yeah, man, those are awesome words. Very true. Eric Ibarra from Magnolia Park, grew up there. We started Magnolia Fund in 2023, but for the last 25 years, I've been in tech. So specifically, back in the day, I think it was 2000 when I first started a business, unknowingly started a business. I really just wanted a really cool website, and I wanted to see all the menus for all the restaurants downtown. Mm-hmm. So as a bike courier back then, I would ride around downtown dropping off packages, and I'd see these new restaurants, and I'd go in and I'd pick up their menu and put their menu like online. Yeah, and nobody was doing that back then. This was before really anybody was contributing to the web. Back then, somebody had a website and they published everything. Yeah. And you just looked at it, you read it, and you interacted with it, but you didn't like contribute to that content. And so this was Web 1.0, if you will.
Yeah. Early internet.
Early, yeah. But for the past 25 years, a lot of tech. But I like to tell people I got really good at business along the way, because every business in my experience starts with a good idea, and as a business owner or entrepreneur, you get better at creating the fundamentals and really sticking to sales, marketing, accounting, bookkeeping, making sure you have those things in place to support your good idea. That's how we survive in business, right? And so along the way, my first ones were like great ideas, everything. I like to think all my businesses were great ideas, but I think Magnolia Fund is number 8, I think.
It's your 8th business.
8th company, yeah, over 25 years. A couple of exits, nothing crazy, but most of the time, in two instances, enough of an exit to allow me to just kind of think about what I want to do next and fund the next thing I wanted to do. And so, but yeah, that's, growing up in Magnolia Park, seeing the perspective of what's been happening in the whole East End. And I consider the East End, I think a lot of people probably may not be familiar, but if you're in downtown Houston, if you look east, pretty much as far as you can see to the Ship Channel, that's what I consider the East End. And so you got neighborhoods like Manchester, Magnolia Park, Eastwood, yeah. Second Ward, Segundo Barrio. I even, some people may not consider it, but like Denver Harbor, Fifth Ward.
Well, for sure, that's the East Side, yeah.
East End, yeah, East Side. So
DH for sure. I think once you get to the other side of 10, yeah, it's questionable. Yeah, totally. You're like now in the north. It started to peak a little bit into the north side, North Main, like yeah, you know what I mean. Especially on that Fifth Ward area, you just keep crossing through, and you get to like the North Main, leads into the Heights, leads into
big time.
It's questionable, but like for sure, I get the logic. Mm-hmm. I spent probably like the first, 15 years of my life just traveling through every single neighborhood that you just talked about right now, because it's like, I
don't know if you grew up riding bikes. Like we would ride our bikes all the way down to Pasadena.
Everywhere.
It was crazy, yeah.
Everywhere. I used to tell people all the time that we would, in the summers, we would get on our bikes and we would go downtown. We would because I grew up down the street from here. So we would literally get on our bikes, go downtown, hang out in downtown, get some burgers, just ride around, try to, just do it. And we would see the city. We would consider ourselves like, oh yeah, we're city people. This is what we do. This is where we're train hopping, or we'll get on the bikes and stuff like that. And we would actually go downtown. Whereas now, I'm not sure kids these days are doing any of that. Not to say that they should be, but I'm just saying like that was the kind of atmosphere that we were growing up in. Like the way that I like to describe it is like The Sandlot meets, you know, like I'm trying to think of like a movie, another movie. It's like The Sandlot meets some like New York, like, you know, Brooklyn in the '90s movie, like
Quicksilver or Rad, those
like,
biking movies, you know?
yeah.
For sure.
So yeah, man, we were like, that's all that we did. So we would ride around. We'd go to Fifth Ward. Our favorite food places were like all around. Like we had some food places in DH that we would go ride our bikes in. We had some food places here on the east side, Champ Burger. Like it just everywhere that we would go to. So it was centered around this area. So it's great, man. It's also like such a huge coincidence that like social media kind of put us in the same, you know, I reached out to you and and I'm like just looking at it because I see Magnolia Fund, and I'm like, oh, what's happening, right? Like what's happening, because that's, you know, the neighborhood that's next after Second Ward, right? You just keep going down Navigation. And there's a lot of stuff happening here right now, and this side of town, for better or for worse, whatever opinion you have of it. And to know that you are centering your life right now, your working life, to some sort of advocacy, and then just in general trying to preserve culture in this side of town, for me is incredibly beautiful. So I don't know where you, I don't know where you want to start specifically. Maybe what is Magnolia Fund? What are you trying to do? What's the mission statement? What's the goal? And then maybe we can weave through like what influenced that decision to start this up for you, and then like what are the obstacles you're facing right now, opinions about the world and what's happening over here in general. Talk to me. What made you start it?
I'll start with a building, just 2 buildings from where we're at today. We're on, you know, Commerce Street in Second Ward, right at the edge of what used to be Second Ward and then Old Chinatown back in the day. Now Chinatown is Edo.
Yeah.
And, you know, I used to live in this warehouse just 2 blocks away. And what was crazy about it was a 40 by 40 warehouse, a metal building, built in the 50s, I think. And it was a part of like a group of little buildings on this kind of triangle lot right here off Commerce. And I got into there in 2010 because I had no money. And I had a struggling transportation company in 2010 that, this was before Uber and Lyft, but I needed to live somewhere, but I needed these vehicles. These were electric vehicles. We were using them as like basically cabs, but we had this unique like ordinance called the Jitney Ordinance. And I needed a garage to work on the cars, and I needed to live somewhere. So I paid $700 a month to have a place for my business and to live. And over the years, I sold that business, but in probably 2014, I remember being in the warehouse and coming out at night and seeing people walking around, like walking their dog or riding their bike at night. And in the hood, it's like, hey man, you okay? Are you lost? You know? And in fact, they didn't look like us. They were mostly white folk.
Yeah.
And I was...
Remind me of the year? What
2014.
2014.
Yeah.
It was already starting to happen.
Yeah. And I realized, oh, wow, the neighborhood's changing. And actually, if you go back and you look at the data from 2007 to 2014, actually, the neighborhood doubled in value. So incomes and property values. And then from 2014 to 2021, it did it again. So those are numbers I know that are online, and I think it's the Easton District or the Easton Chamber has those numbers. It's wild. And seeing and remembering like 2014, seeing that happen, that was sort of the first start that I was like, oh, this neighborhood is changing. Well, I just kept my head down, kept hustling, and kept working on different businesses. But around 2021, I had to move out. The landlord said, hey, we're going to have to make a parking lot out of these buildings, and we're developing the building next door, so we're going to have to ask you to go. And thank God I wasn't in the same position I was in 2010. 11 years later in 2021, I had a career. I had started a company doing lab testing, and this was before the pandemic. So with the pandemic, we were pretty successful. But at that point in 2021, I thought back to 2014, and I was like, wow, the neighborhood has changed a lot.
lot.
Yeah, there was Moon Tower was like the first crack in the sort of commercialization of the East End, and at least on this side, Second Ward.
Yeah.
Edo had already kind of been doing its thing, but by 2021, I found myself with the ability to buy a home, so we started looking and ended up in Eastwood. But I bring all that up because throughout that time, 2010 through 2014, I was able to witness these changes in the neighborhood. And back then, I didn't know how to describe it, but today I like to think of it as strangers playing Monopoly in your living room, and you don't have a seat at the table. I didn't see anybody like us doing things in the neighborhood, like these companies that were building these massive,
Townhomes.
developments. Yeah, townhomes. And like, it used to be maybe 10 years ago, the townhomes were like the big scary thing. In fact, there used to be a mural right there at Morales that was like these big scary monster looking townhomes. Now you've got the Mill, which is right here down the street, East River, and then Buffalo Bayou Project. These are massive projects, billion-dollar projects. And I mean, we'll talk about it, but like, speaking of gentrification, right? Like, the bayou wasn't good enough for them. They call it a river now, East River. And every time I see that, I'm just
crazy,
like,
right?
Okay, And so to me, seeing all that, as an entrepreneur, I'm not one to just be upset about something and just like throw my hands and go, oh, I guess we can't do nothing about it. My mind started going, okay, can we do something about it? If it's true that everybody wants to develop in the East End and that it's going to continue to increase in value, why aren't we leading it? We're the ones that know this neighborhood.
Yeah.
We're the ones who grew up here. We probably have some advantage, and in fact we do. The trust that we have with people in the neighborhood, nobody else has that.
Right.
And if we hold that as like our North Star and say, hey, look, if we can develop something in the neighborhood, hey neighbor, would you go in with me? Like, I could develop something small by myself maybe, but if we all put our money together in a fund and we bought some commercial property and we try to create developments that we actually think are beneficial to the neighborhood, would you go in with me? And that's the sort of thesis behind what we're doing with Magnolia Fund. So we put a fund together, we made that happen, and now we're acquiring a building that is an old commissary kitchen, but we're turning it into a shared kitchen so food entrepreneurs can get in there, they pay by the hour, it's approachable, they have all the kitchen equipment they need, they can store food in the freezer, cooler, dry storage, and we're connecting them with people that are in the food industry that are from the neighborhood and from other places that have already made it, quote unquote, that can help them, mentor them, and guide them as they do their entrepreneurial journey in food.
That's incredible.
Appreciate it.
Is that your only project, or are you
With Magnolia Fund? Yes. Yeah, I think that we have to start somewhere, and for me, we want to move the needle on this property. We literally close in 12 days. 22 days. We're closing July 24th on the building. We'll make some renovations, and then we're hoping to be open by October.
That's incredible, dude. As somebody that grew up here, I can verify that the neighborhood changed. I remember I graduated high school in 2010, so middle school, my childhood all the way up to like maybe like the end of high school, nobody wanted to be in the neighborhood. Nobody wanted to come by. I would walk home at night by myself after the bus would drop off. The lights would barely work. Like the street lights would barely work at night. Like depending on where you were, like there used to be gang activity whenever I was young. When I was, I was really young. So it's changed. And I applaud your overall intention and mission statement, because I'm gonna be just fully transparent. I have had a tug of war with myself about whether what's happening in this side of town is good or bad or mixed, or sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Can both those things be true? And the reason that I say that is because my instinct is there's a huge part about this entire side of town that like I feel keenly connected to. There's an identity there that I know, that I can recognize, that the more and more time passes by, it feels a little bit more, I wouldn't say suppressed. Maybe that's the wrong term. It feels it went from being loud to a whisper.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So then you would wake up in the morning, you would smell the Maxwell house. You would wake up in the morning, you would kind of like get the scent of like the tortillas and the
Fresh
you know
baked
stuff.
bread.
Yeah, fresh bread. Like, you would see it because we had all these businesses in the neighborhood,
Yep.
and slowly it starts to look a little different. You start to you don't even realize that you don't smell that anymore, that you don't see that anymore until it hits you one day and you're like, oh my god, I used to do that all the time, right? So like my instinct is like, this is bad, because like the grandmas that you would live that would be here, the people that stayed here whenever it was bad and gave this place culture and identity and protection, and you know, these kids that were running around. And I mean, we were just like hoodlum kids, right? So like, but like the people that are around here that protected us, that like that gave us advice, so there's like there's a whole culture there and identity there that creates a very specific perspective about life that I can't really let go of, right? Specifically because, like I said at the beginning, it's inherently political, right? There's a lot of sometimes there's talk in the ether in culture, in American culture as a whole, where people are like, oh no, these criminals or this or these like, you know, this and that. Some of the people that gave me the best advice were people that got out of jail.
Yeah.
Some of the, so you know, reformed criminals. Some of the people that they try to villainize now, I think back and I'm like, well, this person fits that description, but that person is like the funniest person I've ever met in my life, and that person like helped me and my family. That person's a good person. This person is reformed, right? So there's a lot of that nuance that happens whenever you grow up in a place like that, that you don't necessarily get anywhere else, and I think there's like a disconnect there. The other side of me, though, sorry, this is long-winded.
No, this is great.
The other side of me that thinks about this a little bit more rationally, I own a townhome on the east side, right? I've been called a gentrifier by people from the neighborhood because of this, even though they don't know that I grew up here also. And just as a sidebar, I say like, well, if anybody's gonna do it, why can't it be me? I'm the one that knows this cultural identity. So then you like look up the term gentrification. What does it mean? What's the connotation? It's usually always used to describe when white people come into a neighborhood and they buy out the property, they double in value, they create opportunity, and then people get pushed out to the outskirts of town or whatever. Yeah, where it used to be that the inner city was where you didn't want to be. You know what I mean? So I go back and forth, man. I go back and forth just because it's tragic, and I would have loved if the neighborhood kept its identity and kept its soul.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I don't want people to get bullied. I don't want people to get like jumped like the way that I was jumped as a kid. Yeah, I don't think it's okay for children that are 10 to 12 years old to have to carry knives with them for protection. Right, so it's a double-edged sword, because on one end you remember your past and your childhood as nostalgia and this like, you know, this freedom, right? This youth and this freedom, this exhilaration. And then on the other hand, you go back as an adult. You have kids now, right? You have a child now. You go back as an adult, and I'm like, man, I think I was, even though it felt normal at the time, I think I knew things as a teenager that I probably don't think I should have known. I wouldn't want my teenager to know that. I wouldn't want my little brother or my younger cousin or my niece or my nephew, like I wouldn't want them to know what those nuances are. So on the other hand, I'm like, yeah, but I don't really want that. The other side of it is that yes, there's a culture and identity, but that doesn't necessarily mean that our neighbors liked each other. That doesn't necessarily mean that because again, it's inherently political. And I go on this rant, so sorry, I am gonna let you speak.
No.
But like, it's inherently political because it's poverty.
Yeah.
And when you're in poverty, you're trying to survive. Some of the people that we would get in the biggest arguments with and fights with, and where we were in the most danger, were our neighbors.
Look just like us.
Because we were all trying to survive. My father was an alcoholic. My mom had 2 jobs. My neighbors were the same, more or less, with maybe a few things, you know, changed here and there. You know, a few details changed. So I look back on it as an adult, that is lucky enough to not have been victim of the things that were commonplace, right? I didn't end up in jail. I didn't end up dead. I didn't end up right, like, so. I look back on it and I'm like, man, we were all just in pain. All the adults in the equation at the time were in their mid-20s, late 20s, early 30s, in pain. These were people that were struggling to survive. These were people that didn't have a proper education. These are people that had children, but they didn't necessarily like go through the right mental process to try to figure out what it means to have a kid. They still needed to do some growing up themselves. And I don't say that with malice. I say that with empathy, right? Sure. Because I want it to be like 100% known. There's like there's some adults in my life where I was growing up where I look back now and I'm like, oh, you were hurting. You didn't know what to do. You know what I mean? So on the other side, on the underbelly of it all, I'm like, yeah, I think there's some things there that I struggle with, right? And if I had a perfect world, right? And I think that this is a good segue for you. If I lived in a perfect world, I would try to bridge the gap between like why funding education is incredibly important, why wealth education is incredibly important, why community organization is incredibly important, and how to like put all these things together in a way where gentrification doesn't necessarily have to be bad. We could gentrify our own neighborhoods. Exactly. We can have. If I could hit a button, I would go back to 20 years from now, and I would figure out a way to get every single house and family that lived on the east side of downtown, and I would figure out a way to get them out of some crazy way for them to get out of the stress of their jobs, to take 2 hours, every now and then to try to sit down and try to tell them this land is valuable, you're valuable, your perspective is valuable, your ideas are valuable. You could be a business owner. You could do this. You could do that. But we all have to work together, because if we don't, eventually we are fractured, and then you'll get bought out, and then you'll get bought out, and then you'll get bought out. And to be honest, like my neighbors right here, right now, I don't live in Houston anymore. I still own that house, but like my neighbors, they don't mean any harm. Sure. They're not like bad people. You know what I mean? But they see opportunity. And they say, well, I can afford. They're millennials, just like me. They're young people trying to. And in this current market, like they're like, you get it where you can get it, man. Because like there's class warfare happening from top to bottom. So like even they're struggling to some degree, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I'm like, I don't want to villainize you. There's no reason. It feels a little weird trying to feel like I'm villainizing you, but like the term gentrification as a whole has a very specific connotation that can like, upset some people. But in my mind, I'm like, it doesn't necessarily have to be bad. We could have done it ourselves. Yeah. We could have gentrified our own. We could have built up the wealth of our own neighborhood. We could have stood together. We could have had a credit union that was just for our own neighborhood, where we helped each other, where we could build each other up. We could have set it, and then that would have domino affected to like, the way that we eat, or the restaurants that we allow in this neighborhood, or the standards that we set for our children to go to college, and what the kinds of futures that they want, the idea of travel, so that we could bring some perspective into our neighborhood. I mean, just in general, like we could have done that ourselves, but we were stuck in the revolving door of pain and the revolving door of what poverty does to communities at large, right? Totally. I know I just ranted. But
no,
speak on all of that.
I mean, in my mind. Let's start with the word gentrification. I think I've been in rooms where, whether it was a board meeting or a civic club meeting, and whether that person was an executive or a resident, those both groups, familiar with this neighborhood, maybe not so familiar with economics, super familiar with economics, both groups believes nothing can be done about gentrification. The executive might say, well, that's not what we do, or
the free market,
we can't stop it. Yeah. And then on this side, there's the hopelessness, right? Yeah. Of like,
I don't know anybody.
Yeah.
Who's going to listen to me?
I literally been to civic club meetings where the old senior, pobrecito, right? He just sits there and said, well, they built this big old thing. Nobody told me. Nobody's going to tell them, you know. They don't have to. They're a developer. They do whatever they want, right? Does that suck? Yes. But in my mind, the problem really is that both sides are looking at this word as big, bad, kukui, right? Like, we don't understand it, but we're going to label it real quick so that we know it's something we can't fight. When in my mind, no. Think about it. Gentrification, we always talk about residential. We're displacing residents. But actually, we're displacing residents, we're displacing businesses, and we're displacing culture. So what if we could focus on maybe not the residents, because by the time gentrification set in, hey, there might be a guy that needs to sell his house.
Yeah.
Shoot, he's been here 30 years. You
Yeah.
deserve every cent you get for that house.
Yeah, or wait it out until you get more.
That's right. So on the business side, what if we could actually purchase real estate together collectively? And that real estate is supporting something that from a cultural perspective we believe in. Obviously, food in the East End has got a storied history. We've got Mama Ninfa, Irma Galvan, you mentioned Champ Burger, one of my favorites, Mandolas, I can go on and on. Mm-hmm. These are folks who built their family generational wealth on food. The problem is, the world they started in just doesn't exist anymore.
Doesn't exist, yeah.
So we've got to get new solutions. We've got to think differently about what it means to be an owner. So the reason we have these shirts, we have dueño for our investors and dueña for our other investors, right? Like we have both shirts because if you're an investor in the fund, we want you to understand that you are an owner now. It comes with a certain level of responsibility. And most people talk about like, I want to be at that table, I want to be at that table. Well, sometimes it's a pretty rough table to be at.
Yeah.
You got to know that this is a risky investment, just like any investment. But where we look at what we're doing as trying to preserve some of that culture is that if we talk about owning more real estate in the neighborhood and that real estate increases in value, then the people that own it might have a chance of sticking around. If they're sticking around, well, guess what? The culture is the people. And if we can keep those people here, you know, we can keep some of that culture. And it's funny because back in the day, I don't know if this was the same for you, but like my parents and my uncles and all the people that wanted me to do good for myself were like, get an education and get the hell out of the hood. So they said, you know, they're like, get out of here.
Yeah.
Now we're practically begging people that are from here, like, please stay here. Like we need your culture here.
For sure. I've never wanted to leave.
Same.
I live in Austin now because my job is taking me in that direction. But like, man, like I rep this side of town like it's my life, man. Like everywhere I go, I'm like, oh, you have no idea. You have no, like this is where my identity lives. Like I can't for the life of me, I can't get rid of it. You said something right now that I think is incredibly important. The culture is the people. So I consider myself primarily an artist. That's kind of where where I feel like my function is, right? Mm-hmm. Some people are really great at public speaking. Some people are politicians. Some people are activists. Some people are nonprofits or business owners or things like that. My entire like brain wraps itself around the human condition and the struggle of people and how that manifests into art in general. So like I see myself as an artist first and foremost. Yep. So whenever I have these conversations with people in passing, or whether I'm at a bar or this or that or whatever, and we're talking about gentrification, there's people that are very passionate about the displacement of residents. Because I've been in these conversations. I often come off as the person that feels a little bit more nihilistic, because, and it's not on purpose. I think it's just a product of like the things that I know. These people are clinging to this idea that like if we get enough people to say something, then they won't move in here. And I'm like, no, they're moving whether you like it or not. Yeah. Because the real problem happened way before this. The real problem is something that you haven't even started to realize that the problem is. You haven't done the backwards retracing your steps as to when this could have gone, like when this could have actually been prevented. However, the good, and I can get into that notion a little bit. The good thing is that the culture is the people. Right now, most of the gentrifiers that are here want the authentic Mexican. They want you can upcharge them because that's how capitalism works. So you can do your thing if you're smart enough about it or whatever, right? Yeah. But they want that because anybody, and I mean everybody, understands culture. That this is why black culture is the most important and most like mimicked and copied culture in the entire world. This is why Mexican and Hispanic culture at large lives everywhere when it comes to, I mean, food is like giant avenue for us to have a silent voice, right? Because you can't go anywhere in Texas without saying chips and queso or chips and guac and those are our stories. Those are our stories. Without that, you wouldn't be able to do that. You wouldn't be able to go to a chain Chuy's or a Papacitos or this and that, even though those are, white owners. Our stories live there though. Like they derive from it's a derivative of the fact that we've been here, right? You can't get that without us. So the culture is the people. So in my mind, as an artist, I say, well, that's great. That's actually fantastic, because that means wherever you are, you can rebuild that culture. And so it's not about real estate. At least in terms of culture, it's really not about being loyal to real estate. It's understanding that the people are the treasure. The people is the so it doesn't matter if all of a sudden, like if you transplant all of Second Ward from 15 years ago to Pearland, then Pearland would be the up and coming thing. You know what I mean? Because again, you can't change who we are as people. You can't change the fact that this entire side of the east side was a rundown, bayou, dirty place that we came in here and we said, okay, fine, we can start our own businesses. We can do our own thing. We can do our own small thing. We can have it small like tortillas. We can have some sort of community bonding. It came with good and bad, right? I just described a whole bunch of things that I don't think anybody should ever have to go through. But you can't have a situation like right now where people are lining up to try to buy these townhomes here and then are looking for the Saturday morning market without us already being here first. You know what I'm saying? Totally. So the downside to that, and I'll start to pull the thread as to that, like the people that are very passionate about the displacement of people. The downside to that is that the real cure is that we should have been educated a long time ago. The real, and it's not even a cure. The real problem started with the fact that, and this sounds like a really big, like leftist, liberal, you want big government to do everything kind of thing, right? But no. It's not that. This government as a whole they are people. It's not like the government is this weird, like, thing in the ether that exists without us, right? No, we are that. You know what I mean? So we have a responsibility to uplift each other. The role of government is to uplift people and to take care of them. It says something about a people and a government when you advocate or vote for representatives that take away things from you. Because even if you have a dream of getting ultra rich, or I have a dream of being uber rich, or like, things like that, even if that's your goal, fine, you can have your own individual goal. It says something whenever, if I am that person, the government will placate to me as opposed to placate to the people that are the culture. As if we just describe these people as the treasure of this neighborhood, this city, this county, this state, right? Placating, it does a disservice. So you cut funding, and what does that create? That creates, and this is a real domino effect. You cut funding, so then that creates a void. That creates a void, and it starts the beginning revolving door of pain. People start to hurt. So what do people do whenever they're hurt? If they're adults and they're not mature enough to understand what's going on because they're so stressed and they're so this and that, they end up getting vices. You end up with the crack epidemic of the late 80s, right before during the Reagan era. And what happens with that? Then two steps of separation removed from that, now you get people talking about how, it's the fatherlessness crisis because there's no fathers in the house and single moms and this and that and blah, 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 and everybody's doing their best. But again, people are in pain. It's not so hard to imagine a world where you do get the fatherlessness crisis, the quote unquote, the term on the right is like the nuclear family. You can't get there in the disruption of that concept without tracing it back to at some point the people in a struggling neighborhood that were in poverty, whether it was Jim Crow South Mississippi that never got the right aid after the end of Jim Crow and after the Emancipation Proclamation, whether it's that or whether it's Latino, businesses that came, or sorry, Latino neighborhoods that came because they're immigrants and that's all that they could afford, and that, right? Like, it doesn't matter which version of that it is. It could be Appalachia. It could be like, in Tennessee, like, whatever. It could be the middle of Appalachia where like the poorest white people live. Yeah. If you do not create an environment that incentivizes them to go and get education and not feel like they're trying to survive, and they don't feel the weight of the psychological weight of that, you will eventually get to the breakdown of everything that happens. And then the incredibly disingenuous and infuriating part for me is that then you will blame them for it. Because then the right will come in and they will say, what's your response? Pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Do all this, blah blah blah, this and that. I'm like, I don't see any legacy wealth generator, having to have done that. Ford didn't do that. Buffett didn't do that. Zuckerberg didn't do that. Bezos didn't do it. All of them had trust fund money from their what's his name? The steel dude. Carnegie. Carnegie, like. All of these people that like have built like these incredible wealths of, like, it's not, they didn't do that just off of hard work. It's not like they were on their knees trying to make this happen. Eventually they got some subsidy. Eventually they figured out how to way to get in the rooms with some of these with some of these politicians, and they're like, hey, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Like that's how it happens, right? And then you blame me for not having the grit and like stick-to-itiveness and the gravity to be able to withstand the weight of all of that, and then you do that to whole communities. It's just disingenuous, and it's incredibly infuriating. So then I go back to the conversation with the person that's passionate about the gentrification and displacement of people, and I'm like, I agree with you. I think that's tragic. I don't want people to get displaced. Right. I understand the pain that you feel because your grandma has to go somewhere else. I get all that. I get that. Unfortunately, I don't think you're going to be able to do anything about it right now because you don't have the money to fight them back. You don't have the money to be like, no, I'll buy it instead. Right. You don't have that. And then second, you don't know the people that you need to get into rooms with to try to make some of that happen. And then thirdly, if all of the entire neighborhood would have learned, if there was some initiative at some point back in the day where it was like, look, Pancho Costa is going to come off on the 25th, but like everybody has to go to the community meeting because then we all have to get together and we have to figure out a way to like keep the solidarity strong and make sure that like everybody here protects each other and that we elevate the worth of all our houses and businesses and we could have done that ourselves, but we were too busy struggling trying to survive. We were too busy, the 22-year-old kid that was on his second kid was having an identity crisis and didn't know what to do because their parents were in the same revolving door. You can't expect that kind of elevation from people that are struggling. And this is not race specific. Anybody, you could be a white person, you could be an Asian, you could be a black person, it doesn't matter. If you were put through that kind of a struggle, you will not be able to you will not be able to tap into your actual potential until you are done with fight or flight. For sure. You know what I mean? Absolutely. Sorry, that was long-winded again.
No, but I appreciate the conversation. This is I think the most I've been able to talk through gentrification and talk about it because we're not trying to redefine it. I think it has plenty of definitions out there. I think of a metaphor of a wave, right? Most people see a wave at its crest when it's really happening, and that's the same for gentrification. In the neighborhood, people are like, oh, there's these new buildings going up. Well, at this point, we're already so far. So what do we do now?
Yeah, the earthquake happened in the middle of the ocean a long time, a while back.
Totally, exactly. Yeah. So what I tell people is like, look, we have gotten used to there's nothing we can do about gentrification, so we're just sitting on the beach watching the wave instead of figuring out how to surf, figuring out how to build our own boats, figuring out how we need to be out there, leveraging the power of that wave. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise, we're just watching.
For sure.
It's like if we were to play, and many conversations with folks who are passionate about gentrification or worried about what it'll do or hoping that it'll change something, they're always playing defense, in my opinion. And what I mean by that is, hey, I need the government to fix this somehow, or this is unfair. And like, hey, yes, it is all of the above, yes. But, right? how do we stop playing defense and start playing offense? We need to be the ones that are proactive and saying, hey, we can do this too.
Yeah.
Because you watch any sport game, any sporting event, any game out there, you can't play defense all game. You got to be on offense every now and then. And that's sort of our sort of like driving force behind what we're trying to do. It's like, sure, not everybody can invest in our fund, but we brought the barrier down to like literally $100. People can invest for $100. And we even think $100, hey, for the person that's investing $100, them losing that $100 might actually be like more impactful, yeah, right? Than the guy that can write a $10,000, $50,000 check. He or she already knows, yeah, kiss my investment goodbye because this is super risky. It could, I may not get my investment
and you
back.
can write it off as a loss.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But the guy or the gal that's doing $100 or $500, we actually take that with more reverence. Like we're more serious about those folks because it's like, this better be something you don't need next year, right, or the year after. But this is our.
$500 is like you pop 2 tires.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or you need like a new transmission. Like $500 to set you back. Again, this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about. Like this goes back to like the poverty conversation. Like, you know, I'm fortunate enough that I live above the median statistic where it says like most Americans can't afford a $1,000 medical expense or something like that. So like I live above that, and I'm incredibly grateful and incredibly lucky. However, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden I'm entitled to tell people like, well, you should do it. If I could do it, you could do it. Totally. Like, no. You have no idea. Like, the amount of luck that it took for me to even get there, so that now I have the right to be on a moral high horse. That's ridiculous. Because I know what it feels like to have a $150 tire expense because you were driving to work of the job that you already are struggling to get anything out of, and if you work overtime, you're now. Again, this is the revolving door. You work overtime. You are now overextending yourself. So now all of a sudden you can't sleep well. So now all of a sudden you're stressed. So now all of a sudden you're too tired to try to go up and apply back to school. So now you're all of a sudden. Do you know what I'm saying? Like all of a sudden now it took three little steps for me to for somebody to get put from like I had $150 that I didn't want, that I was just saving, to like now I've been stressed for 9 months. Yeah. Because I had and these people were everywhere. It doesn't matter if they just got out of college, or if it's the single mom that's working 2 jobs to feed and get their kids through school. So I completely agree, and I completely understand why the $500 from the person that believes in you. But they're a working class family, why that investment means more to you than it means from the guy that showed up and it's like, all right, I'll write you $10,000 and then like I'll call you back next quarter to see how everything's doing. Yeah, you know exactly. What I mean? What is the or is there a part of your company that is focused on education?
Yeah, actually. One big thing that we have to recognize is that if our goal is to stir up this conversation of generational wealth among our community, then that means we're having to take the community as a whole and say, some folks may not know anything about investing. So before they write a $100 check or a $1,000 check, we have to inform them what the risks are, what the expectations are, potential return, potential reward. We have to be very realistic with them and make sure that they understand this is something that don't invest in our fund unless you've capped out your IRA if you're self-employed, or you're capped out your 401k. You're doing everything you can to worry about your retirement. Maybe you also looked at your own life insurance as a policy to make sure your family's taken care of if something were to happen to you. Like, we actually have some checks that we need to check with people before they write that $100 check, because I don't want people to feel as if they're putting the cart before the horse. This is an investment if you have that money to kiss goodbye. but it's also a way for you to be thinking about if it fits within your investment plan and it's something that you've learned over time as part of something I want to get into. I want to do stocks, or I'm going to say this word, and I never say this word, but it's like, if somehow you're investing in crypto, cool, great, nothing wrong with that. The only problem I have with crypto is that for the retail investor, the folks who can just download the app and click a button, they don't really know what they're getting into sometimes.
Yeah,
and that's scary. And so I would love, don't get me wrong, for people to be like, oh man, Magnolia Fund, I want to invest like that. Sure. It's a couple more steps you got to take before, you know, you can invest in what we're doing. But that's the thing out here. Like, the way tech and the way financial models, well, I should say, you know the signs that are on the street that say, we buy ugly houses?
Yeah.
Right? Okay. They're actually hoping that people call them who are in a desperate situation.
Of course,
right?
Yeah, that's the whole reason.
A couple years ago, I saw a company that took that same concept, right? Everything I just described about kind of being in a desperate situation, and they kind of techified it, if you will. And I don't want to give them any free credit, right? No free commercials. But what they did is they said, hey, why don't you invest in the hot residential market that is Austin? You can buy a piece of this fund, and we're going to say that whenever this value goes up of this fund, your investment goes up. Now, if you read the fine print, there's no way for you to sell your shares. There's no liquidity. There's an arbitrary determination of how the value goes up. And then you have to think about, well, okay, well, what's backing my investment? Like with Magnolia Fund, we're saying very clearly, like, our kitchen needs to make money from food entrepreneurs who are renting it out. That's how we're going to create returns for investors. There's no like stock market aspect to it. Well, with this thing that I saw, and this is before we started the fund, so I kind of learned from this to be like, man, this is kind of predatory. What they were doing is saying, hey, residential person who owns a home in Austin, why don't you sell some of your equity to us? And we'll give you money for it, cash for it. You don't have to pay it back. You stay in your home, you never have to pay it back. But because we're now part
owners of your house, yeah.
We may have first right of refusal, right? Something happens where you can't pay your mortgage, well,
take it.
You take it. That's super predatory, and that's taking that sort of we buy ugly houses and just taking it to the worst level. And when I saw that, I thought, man, I don't know. Luckily, I will say they got bought out. Now it's part of some other fund. But I don't know, like, think about who's trying to sell equity in their home. You think it's people in River Oaks or Westview?
Oh, definitely not.
No. And it's like, you're still preying on people. You're just doing it with a really shiny package, and I don't like that. And so those are some things that I learned in the last 5 years, I would say, that I was like, all right, we don't want to be like that. Right?
When it also feels like exploitation, right? It's predatory and exploitative because of the fact that, like, even if you happen to be a mom and pop business, or if you happen to like have a trade job, you're doing well, you went up to manager, now you're in charge of some stuff, now you're now you work for the city, and you're a trash waste management, or you're a plumber, or whatever it is that you're doing, right? Even if you manage to be a manager now and you've been there for 15 years and 20 years and now you make some decent money, because trade jobs make some good money. Yeah. So even if you're there and you own your home or this and that, you don't know what equity in your home actually means. You don't know how you can leverage that. You don't know how you can get a loan. You don't know how to refinance and get and do a renovation. You don't know you don't know any of that, because that's not what you're taught. That's why when my like, to your point, people in Westview and River Oaks aren't selling equity of their home. That's ridiculous. They're like, no, I have money. I can just give you cash for something. You don't need to own part of what I own, right? So it's exploitative because that company knows that there's value in the equity, and then they know that the people don't know the value of their equity and how to use that to leverage it. I'm not saying leverage it in a big way. I'm not saying go get a PPP loan or something like that, right? Yeah. Like, I'm not saying do something, but you do have some power. Yeah. You could use that equity to invest in something. Mm-hmm. You could use that equity and try to think about get a small business loan if you all of a sudden you've always had this dream to, like, blah blah blah, whatever it is. You know what I mean? Oh, yeah. You do have some power. But most homeowners don't know it because they're too busy going to work, and they have to come back, and they have to, you know what I'm saying?
Well, that's the thing. You know, you talked about that, the reason you brought it up. You know, education. I brought up that example also because, like, I think some of our role is to ensure that our community doesn't fall victim to the next thing like that.
Right.
And that is, you know, education is expensive, but In this case,
it's expensive
you
on
get
both,
you get what you pay for. Oh yeah, yeah,
it's expensive
exactly.
on both parts. It's expensive to get it, and it's expensive to not
have
know it.
Yeah, totally. So I agree that like what we're, everything we do, we have to educate a little bit on, you know, we're getting ready to have a pre-open house, because what I've told investors is you need to see this building in its current state, so that when we renovate it, you can actually appreciate the value and see how much more valuable it looks and how it would appeal to our customers. And it would be just like if you as an owner go out and want to flip a house, you're going to see it in its current state. You need to see this building in its current state. And so we're going to do this pre-open house so that our investors learn more about this process.
It's very transparent.
Yeah, for sure.
It just dawned on me while you were saying it. This is a very Houston-specific episode, which is like, again, like very near and dear to my heart. We have some viewers that are in other cities, in other states. So if you are out there, just as a forewarning, if you are out there and a lot of this information sounds really great, and you're hoping and you're like, oh, but this isn't Houston or whatever, I would just encourage you to, as a sidebar, to go and do some research and get some, do your very best to read up as much as you can, because for there are a lot of predatory snake oil salesmen out there. But there is also people that are very willing to help, and in the same way that you are from this neighborhood that are working to try to push in the right direction, that also exists in Los Angeles. It also exists in Chicago. It also exists in New York. It also exists in Atlanta. There's been some, to the point about gentrification, there's been some neighborhoods in Atlanta that black people gentrified. That black people said, no, let's come together, let's buy the whole block, and then we'll buy the next block, and then we'll do, you know what I mean? Because yours is a fund, I was more so it's not a nonprofit.
Not a nonprofit. Yeah, that's a great point. Like,
it's not a nonprofit, because in my mind for a second I'm like, I guess what I really meant by the question was, is there an initiative that you have where you hold public classes or some sort of public initiative, especially now with the internet and YouTube and this and that, where like you can teach people about how to figure out if something's a scam, or what is a Roth IRA, what is a 401, what's the best place to get it, where's the best place to go, this is how as a community you guys can all come together, why credit unions are sometimes better than banks, because credit unions have your money in it, and it's a pool of all of your money, depending on the type of credit union, right? But like there could be a second word credit union. Where every single person in the neighborhood has their money there, and they don't go to Chase, and they don't go to Wells Fargo, and they don't go to any of those places, because all their money is pulled together, and the credit union is only as strong as the community puts its money in. But they don't know that.
No,
you know
free sort of business idea, like in the East End, especially Eastwood, there should be an Eastwood home insurance company, because my home insurance is skyrocketed like last year, and I feel like if there was a way to pool money specifically for the insurance of people in the East End, I think you could have a really solid product there, just because like you would know that you could gain.
That's a good idea.
You know what I'm saying? Like you know the area, and so like there's some economies of scale to be had there, I would say, for sure.
Let's get a little meta.
Yeah.
Let's get a little like philosophy driven.
All right,
because I hear you talk about like pool, like this is a new concept. People out there, there's some rich neighborhoods out there that do pool their money together. That they you know what I mean? But what do you say in this political climate currently? If somebody that was right winger on the right, more conservative, especially more fiscally conservative or libertarian,
yep,
they hear you say, let's pool our money together, you're part owner, you're part this and that they will very quickly get to that socialism. What do you say? What do you say about that critique? If I was to make it, not that I will make it. I'm just saying, like, I want to kind of poke at this from every angle, because what you're asking for is co-ownership. You're asking for some sort of like, in essence, if I wanted to put these specific words to terms to it, what you're saying is you're trying to develop the way for the community to own itself. And to all have a say in it, which is, it's not that far off from a very, at least socially democratic, democratic socialism kind of aspect of like the value comes from us. So like, what do you say about that? How do you
I think that's a fair
reconcile with
question,
that?
right? Because actually, we have a fund where every investor invests knowing that they are part owner, but they also invest knowing that there has to be someone at the table making 99% of the daily operational decisions. Now, that other 1%, that deals with big things like, are we going to distribute a return this month or this quarter or this year? That is a voting mechanism that we have built into our bylaws, into our operating agreement. All that information is on our website. You click on the button that says invest. Had to be super transparent, but I bring it up because your question specifically around like, what would you say to someone who's saying, okay, that sounds like socialism? It reminds me of, I think, a little bit of a TikTok trend I saw. It's like, what's one thing if you're poor, but another thing if you're rich? And it's like, okay, but if you and your buddies, your trust fund buddies, got together and said, you know what, I want to buy that Fifth Avenue building, but I want us all to go in together, and we're all going to create this joint venture, and we're all going to be, great.
And we'll put tenants in there,
Yeah.
and we'll split the rent.
Yeah,
Like,
and then we'll each, hey, everybody put in $1 million each. It's like, whoa, okay, if you're doing it with big money, it's capitalism, but if you're doing it with chump change, it's socialism? No. This is capitalism. And in fact, I tell everybody,
that's a great answer.
we're looking at this as a capitalistic problem. If we agree gentrification is a problem, I think it's actually a little bit of a capitalistic problem, because you've got people with more wealth coming in, displacing people with less wealth who aren't prepared for the change in value of their equity, right? And all of a sudden their house is worth more, but guess what? You owe more in taxes. They're not ready for that. So the rich people that are coming in, displacing, capitalistic problem, right? So
that's capitalism 101.
Yeah.
Actually, it's maybe not
but
101.
no, yeah.
Maybe
But
it'll
I
take
look
you a
at it
couple
as
weeks.
like we're trying to attack a very capitalistic problem with capitalism. Because in this
Sure.
case, fighting fire with fire, I think is warranted. Because guess what? For over 100 years, at least in this country, we've tried to fight gentrification with all kinds of other mechanisms.
And it hasn't worked.
It hasn't worked. It's only when you realize that being an owner and being someone who actually controls your own destiny when it comes to the real estate, and from a control perspective. So I may not be the owner, but let's say I own controlling interest in the decision making of this company. Well, then I get to dictate what happens with this. And so in our sort of world, Magnolia Fund gets to decide what we develop on this property. And we might have a vote if in the future we decide we don't want to do a kitchen, or let's say we're on to fund number 2, and you asked about programming and sort of education. Our kitchen our building today is all kitchens, 2,200 square feet, pure kitchen. If in fund number 2, we start with we looking at different buildings, and we acquire another building that has more ability to support programming and education and panel discussions. That's actually one of the things we would be excited about, to do more education in that kind of forum, that kind of setting. But yeah, I hope that brings a little clarity. Like, we definitely look at this
That's a great
as
answer.
like, you got to fight fire with fire.
Yeah, that's a great sound. I definitely wasn't trying to have a gotcha moment or anything
No,
like
no,
that.
totally.
I only think about it because I agree with you. I think that's a great idea. I think community-led programs as a whole is the way to go everywhere in the country, not just in neighborhoods that are getting flipped or whatever, right? I just wanted to throw that out there because I know that I'm going to clip something. Sure. And some of the very first comments are going to be like, oh, you guys just want, of course the liberals want socialism, and like, you guys, don't understand that never works, or this and that, and
Earlier when I was talking about all businesses are a good idea,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's 2 things that can happen. You can either not know your business fundamentals, and that business might fail, or worse, like, can be mediocre. Mediocre means like, oh, we're making just enough to skate by, and we think we can just turn the corner.
Yeah, but your dream stays alive.
Yeah, it really, it's a horrible position to be in. I've been there. Or you can like throw it on steroids, and it goes into this super growth mode. And quite frankly, that's what we've been doing in VC, venture capital.
Yeah.
And it's, excuse my French, but it's bastardized a lot of businesses. So when I think about like, everything starts as a good idea, and this is kind of, maybe we're not ready to bridge over into politics just yet, but health insurance actually started, the first version of health insurance in the United States was in Oregon, and it was this logging company. They literally chopped down trees. At the turn of the previous century, in the 1900s, this company decided, well, you know what? We know that every year, like 2 to 3 guys are going to lose a limb. They're going to lose an arm or a leg. 1 or 2 guys is going to die. We're going to have 4 to 5 guys that are going to be disabled, like because of our job, because of the role they play for our company. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a portion of their paycheck and we're going to put it in a pool. And we're going to use that as a fund. So if someone gets injured, someone gets hurt, someone loses a limb, those medical expenses or funeral expenses, or those expenses to take care of their family from here on out, they're going to be covered. They did that for decades. That was the start of what we know today as Cambria Health. Cambria Health is an insurance company in the Pacific Northwest. But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on if you're covered by them, they're now part of Blue Cross Blue Shield. They're part of the larger system that we know of healthcare today. And I would argue that, I'm sure I have Blue Cross Blue Shield. There's United Healthcare, which made the news last year. There's
rough.
Yeah. Oh God.
Rough moment.
What I see out there is a good idea that, 100% of those expenses that they were pooling that money together back in the day in Oregon, those went to not healthcare systems. Most likely they were church-run hospitals, because that's all we had back in the day. And they were basically churches. You could also say nonprofits, but back then it was just mainly churches that had their own hospitals. That's where 100% of our healthcare used to go. In that case, I would argue you get what you pay for. That you absolutely knew what you were, okay, I'm sick, I need to go, this is going to cost me $10. You pay for $10, it went straight to the hospital, paid the doctor that was on staff. Today there are so many middlemen in the healthcare system. Especially in the insurance industry, we heard and we saw a preview of it with the United Healthcare incident with their CEO. But basically, in my mind, this great idea of pooling money together so that we can afford the things that allow us to be free. It's July 4th, right? We're talking about, sometimes, we didn't even talk about it, but like...
Happy July 4th.
Yeah, right? We're so far from freedom in the systems we have today, unfortunately. Like, I have health insurance, and a year ago, I had a health event where my heart literally stopped, and they had to put a pacemaker in, and then 3 months later, pacemaker was doing great, but it got infected. I had to go in the hospital again. I stayed twice as long that time, almost died again. And I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't had health insurance. And this year right now, I'm thinking, oh man, like my coverage just started over. I got to go for all these follow-up appointments. I got to come out of pocket for a $2,500 scan so I can stay alive. That sucks. And fortunately, like you said, at least I have money that I could pay for it today.
Yeah.
But what if I didn't?
Yeah.
Like, I'd be stuck, man. And so pooling money for health insurance expenses funded by the great idea, we've bastardized it.
Yeah, in that situation, that's where I understand. Like, make no mistake about it. There's a little red state in me also.
Sure.
There's like the situation that the healthcare system is an incredibly important decision, an incredibly poignant point, an example where I'm like, yeah, bureaucracy sucks. So, like too much bureaucracy gets in the way of things that were potentially a good idea. I'm all for that. I would really appreciate it if all of those middlemen were able to jump back into the job market a little bit more comfortably, so that we're not displacing workers, because again, we're not using the term gentrification at that point, but again, this is where me as an artist comes through. You say, here's this problem, here's bureaucracy, here's the healthcare system, so many middlemen. I'm like, okay, some capitalist out there, Elon, would say, let's cut the middlemen out. Me, I'm like, okay, maybe these middlemen are not incredibly important and it gets in the way of things that the function of this good idea, but like, I don't want those people to also struggle. So we need to figure out a way to like, not displace them, but relocate them, so that maybe they won't have the same exact kind of like performance or the same exact, salaries or something like that. But like we still have to take care of our people, and for some reason we think that because of this, like when we're having this conversation about this community, so these are our people. But I'm a Texan, so this is our people also. I'm a United States citizen. These are our people. So like yes, I'm talking about potentially getting rid of jobs in this hypothetical scenario, but I don't want those people to struggle either. Because if I'm thinking like the government, again, this goes back to my original point. It says something about us as people to let something like that happen without having some sort of failsafe. Like you have to have empathy for the people that are contributing to the nooks and crannies of your government, regardless of how far removed you are in thinking about that problem. Anyway, I think we've touched on some things from a lot of different perspectives, so we might as well just dive straight into it. Let's talk about politics.
For sure.
Where do you want to start? We've been talking about funding, and I brought up education and the funding of education and the importance of it in general as a whole for communities all around the country. Do you want to start with the small horrible bill?
Yeah,
that's what I call it.
Yeah, that's a great name, actually. The biggest thing, one thing I want to think about is, I'm a big believer in follow the money.
Of course.
If you are saying that all these senators, GOP, Republican Party senators, voted for this bill, I have to wonder what's their incentive, because when you see the breakdown, and like I literally had to go to ChatGPT to be like, what's the positive? What's the net gain we're supposed to get from this? The people, unless they are, and I'll give it to them, maybe they didn't read the bill, but the people that voted for it, I don't even see a benefit for them. And what it reminds me of is like, somehow, this administration's chokehold, it may be just a threat of like, hey, if you don't back me, if you don't back this bill, you're not going to get elected next term, maybe.
That's what it is.
I think that's what it is, right? Because like, how could you vote for your own people to lose and to come out worse than we had it before? It just blows my mind.
I was having a conversation with I was getting my haircut down the street, because every time I come to Houston, I'm like, I got to go talk to my barber, right? I got to support small businesses. He knows that he watches the podcast, so he knows that like I get heated sometimes about like some of the things that we're talking about, especially in politics. And he was talking to me about the bill, and I'm like, look, dude, I think the infuriating part is not, at least for me, the infuriating part is not, I can't believe these politicians did like that. I'm okay. I'm already, that is wrapped in a really big, beautiful bow in my mind. Like the idea that like politicians can be scumbags. Totally. That's not lost on me. I'm cool about that. Yeah. The really infuriating part about this bill specifically, when it comes to like all the cut in funding that's happening, I just described earlier the domino effect of what happens whenever some things don't end up happening. Yeah. You're not going to see it right now, but 5 years from now, 6 years from now, once Congress has reappropriated and allocated the money where it needs to go, because again, part of education is knowing how this is going to get funded, right? People don't know how Congress works. People don't know how the government works. People don't know that Congress is in charge of budget allocation. People don't know that that Congress serves a bigger function than just this. People don't know any of that, right? So again, it's not their fault. Revolving door of pain. I go back to the same, to the same point. You're busy trying to survive. You can't figure out how the Constitution works, right? Like that's not your, that's not your main priority. You know what I'm saying? It's also why cops will take advantage of your rights. It's also why separate conversation. Totally. 5 years from now, 6 years from now, you're gonna feel the sting, the slight sting, either as a person or as a community or as a people at large or as a specific demographic, where you're going to start seeing those kinds of things have the ripple effect and the domino effect way past the point where it happened. The bill passed 2 days ago. We're not going to remember 2 days ago whenever 5 years from now when people are struggling. And the really infuriating part about it to me is that we are going to start to see the effects in lower income communities where some of this funding is not going to be going to, or rural communities that are losing their hospitals or their clinics, and right. So you're going to start to see a spike in the death rate. You're going to start to see a spike in suicide. You're going to start to see a spike in mental health, like like needing mental health. You're going to start to see a rise in or like a drop in high school graduation statistics. You're going to start to see a rise in teen pregnancy. You're going to start to see all of these small things that to any random person will see that kind of stat and be like, oh, that's happening independent over here. No. They're all tied together. They're all tied together because because all of those things are part of what I like to call social cohesion. In order for you to have social cohesion as a community, as a state, as a country, you need very basic things to be like checked off and working properly. I'm talking about on average at large. I'm not talking about every single one of those people. People are going to still make individual choices and they might make bad decisions. Somebody might end up with an opioid addiction regardless of the fact that they had all of the things that I'm talking about. I'm talking about at large in the statistical level, right? In order for you to maintain that social cohesion, you need all of those things. So when you break the cohesion, when you stop the funding of all of these things, you are essentially slowly dismantling that cohesion. So it's going to be fractured, and you're going to start to see all of those things, and people are not going to be able to link it back to what happened 2 days ago. And then people will then get on Fox News or get on the news and be like, well, of course. I mean, just look at them, like, oh, they all want to be rappers, or they all want to do this or this and that, or they all want to be, or like, of course, look at them. It's like it's degenerate behavior, or oh, look at that. It's like what do you expect from people that look like that, or what do you expect from immigrants, or what do you expect from you can only expect them because it's why you can't trust these people, and it's why right, and it just continues the like dehumanization, all this stuff, and you're not going to be able to link it back to the fact that all of this had this first. That when the earthquake happened in the middle of the ocean, underneath it all, you never felt it, and then the tsunami is hitting, and you're too busy trying to figure out the tsunami to go back to your wave, right? You're too busy trying to fight the tsunami that you can't realize that that it wasn't an earthquake, a naturally occurring earthquake. It was an earthquake that was self-induced by our elected officials, and I think that's the infuriating part, because I can already see the talking points of right-wing, pundits about the horrible statistics in our country, and then I can also see them weaponize it for political pageantry in the election campaigns. I can already see. I mean, what do you expect from Democrat-ran cities? What do you expect from blue cities? Look, they're ruining, like, you can't even get, the teenage pregnancy down, and you want to go over here and say that you're best for this country, right? Whenever, like, we are the most populated, we're subsidizing the most people outside of our own, like, our state sometimes, right? Like Dallas, Austin, Houston, San Antonio subsidize pretty much all of Texas, right? And California subsidizes us even more, so, like, despite the, like, sibling rivalry. So, that I think to me is the infuriating part, because I can already see the domino effect landing all the way on the other side, and then I can already see us being villainized. I can already see these communities being scapegoats for the next political election. I can already see the talking points of right-wing politicians saying like, well, of course, it's because that's a blue city. It's because that's a blue county. It's because that's a blue this. It's because, right? And completely neglect the fact that the earthquake started with things like what happened 2 days ago. You know what I mean? And when I say it like that, everybody follows it. When I say it like that, everybody's like, "You're 100% right," because that's what happened. That's what happened after Reagan, right? It was the crack epidemic after during Clinton and Reagan and all this stuff. I mean, we saw the remnants of it. We're having a conversation about our neighborhood, so we can tie it back, right? So like I saw the effects of the crack epidemic. I had friends in middle school and high school that were crack babies. We saw it. You know what I mean? And we also saw you villainize it, and we also saw us get used as scapegoats. We see every election year how immigration becomes like a big thing, so we see us getting used as scapegoats also. This is why I say, like, the color of our skin, we're inherently political. We can't avoid it, right? So I think that to me is the most infuriating part, because again, it ties back to everything that I'm saying about all of these like meta things. Like, yeah, sure, I can put it eloquently like this, and it may not happen exactly the way that I say it. It might be some derivative of that, or some like altered form of that, but the general idea stays the same. And the really concerning part is that most people can't see it because they're too busy working, and they're too busy trying to survive. And if you're a part of the lower income community or the working class, or if you're part of a community that's really suffering, you're too busy trying to survive than to think about what I just told you, than to think about voting, than to think about right?
It's a luxury at that point.
It's crazy,
When
dude.
so I think a lot about one of my favorite movies is The Big Short, and I think about
yeah.
the housing crisis,
Yeah.
because I think in the movie, and it's true, right? At some point, this great idea of a mortgage-backed security, it started with Lehman Brothers, Louis Ranieri in like the 70s, right?
Yeah.
Became just this mutant of a thing that became uncontrollable in the early 2000s and created this ticking time bomb that we now call
The mortgage crisis.
mortgage crisis, right? But what I think about is at the start of the movie, right? It starts with like, I don't know, some like voiceover talking about finance used to be this snooze of a business you were in, and it was just like something you got into, right? It wasn't like you weren't trying to be a billionaire. But then over time, we saw finance grow into what it is, let's say early 2000s. And during that voiceover, he's like, it just became this mutated idea, and finance became the controller of our world. Well, I would argue 25 years ago, you got into tech like me because I just wanted a cool website. But if you rode the wave of let's bastardize and let's super growth this thing, who was at the inauguration? It was tech companies sitting behind the president. And what I feel like is
the next wave is AI.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Next wave is these companies that control not only the tech, but they control the purse strings of the lobbying groups that talk to the administration, but also other forms of distribution, other ways that we are not privy to. But when we see that crashing wave later, we will be able to go, oh, it was tech. And so I feel so like
So you're reading tea leaves
disillusioned
right now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so disillusioned because for the last 25 years I was part of tech, right? And for the last 10 years, healthcare, and now they're just coming together in this horrible way, where I don't want anything to do with them. Because let's just take healthcare; it's such a rigged game. If you're not in the pharmaceutical industry, if you're not in health insurance, or if you're not in, I'm missing one, but like if you're not part of the big machines of healthcare, you're part of this rigged system. And so you can raise money for your healthcare startup company, but a lot of in the 10 years I've been in healthcare, a lot of the health companies that they have this like blue sky, sort of just like this amazing altruistic mission, we're going to fix healthcare. What they don't realize is the difference between Web 1.0 and Web 2.0 is that there was no Web 1.0 standing in the way. So with healthcare, we have a healthcare 2.0 that we've been all waiting for. We've been waiting for, first it was tech, and then it became AI to fix healthcare. I'm sorry, but you have healthcare 1.0 standing in the way of that. And it's the big pharma, big insurance companies that are not going to allow that to happen. And I just think that there's so much in both tech and healthcare in the last 25 years that I've quite frankly become disillusioned by, because these solutions, Silicon Valley is not solving second world problems. Sorry.
No, they're not.
It's just not. And it hurts because it's like, man, I built my career in tech and in healthcare, and what do I have to show for it? Sure, I'm comfortable today, but like legacy-wise, what am I passing down to my kids? Hey, you got to be part of this system if you want to succeed.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Well, and that's where I have a big critique for capitalism at large, because I'm a capitalist. I'm not saying I'm anti-capitalism, but I have a critique because there's vampire capitalism is a real thing, and you have these insurance companies. I feel for them, in a way, Again, the artist in me is gonna peek its head out, right? Like I feel for the CEO of you of and to you know, to some degree of the yeah, you're getting a lot of money, right? So I have a critique for you, right? However, I also feel for you because you have to go to quarterly meetings about you know, making sure that your profits are high, and then if you decide that you don't want, like, that things are sorry, not if you decide. If they gets decided that you're not making enough money, you'll lose your job and you'll be fine. You'll be cozy. You'll get a severance package. But then, like, another head will grow out of that snake. So it won't really matter. The expectation that company, that behemoth of a company, again, to the bastardization of the behemoth of the company, now sits in a position where it's making so much money that it can't afford to fail. And they won't let it fail because it's already a cash cow, right? So then again, the quarterly earnings become a very important thing that you have to keep up with, which in my opinion, like, that's not really free market. If it was a free market, then there might be an insurance company that whenever the state of the healthcare system changes, yeah, that company might dissolve, but it can turn into something different. It could change their models. It could just that. But no, this is the cash cow. Let's beat it till it's dry, and whenever it's dry, we'll ask the government to pump up more money, and we'll ask for some sort of bailout.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's where I have a critique, not for capitalism in general in theory on a philosophical level, but a huge critique of vampire capitalism in the way that we've injected our own paranoia and emotions into it, and we can't let it do its thing. Because I can guarantee you, my instinct, and I can't prove this, but my instinct is that if we were really in free range market capitalism, we would have been at healthcare for all already.
Oh yeah.
Because the market would have driven itself to that, because that would have made the most sense, and it would have made more money in the long run. More statistical money. Instead, there's a group of people, a small group of people that are all making a lot of money, and they're like, we can't afford to not make this money. So then the bastardization of the idea comes up. That we can get into the nooks and crannies of that. Probably not for this conversation. I'm sure there's going to be some tech bro on the comment section ready to flame me, and it's okay. You can get this smoke, whatever whatever you want. I'll you know, there'll be a time and a place. But I agree, and I think politics right now it has put us in a position where, again, I go back to the education thing. People don't know that. You and I can have a conversation with that, and it seems like a very poignant conversation, and we understand each other, and we're sitting there, we can have a beer, and we can be like, yeah, man, that's fucking, we have like a vision for the world, right? But like most people don't know that. Again, like to your point, Silicon Valley is not solving second world problems. Like the people of second world are trying to work. They're trying, you know, and this is why for me it's like I can't in good, like this is where like the overwhelming like hopelessness or like nihilism comes in, you know, to some degree, because it's like we're having this very great conversation where we very obviously agree, which is incredibly, you know, refreshing. But my artist brain is like, but that grandma needs to do her laundry, dude, and that kid that's in fifth grade or sixth grade that now has to worry about ice coming to their school. That's insane, dude, right? And so I'm like, the degree of like a desolation and isolation that some of these people are feeling in these communities that are hurting, like it just breaks my heart, and I can't, like, for the life of me, it doesn't really matter how much money I make, like for the life of me I can't get those people out of my head. You know what I mean?
It's one more example of, and I think over the years, maybe your parents are similar to my parents, is, you know, do things the right way, put your head down, stay busy, follow the rules. And when I think about the rug pull that is this bill, when it comes to, okay, you're funding ICE like it is the military, quite frankly. Now, what does that mean for people who have, because already in the news we've seen countless people who have, quote unquote, been doing things the right way, don't have a criminal record, they got deported. And so what does that mean? Like, if I have to, in my home, if we have to have a conversation, both my wife and I are born here in the States, but we're having a conversation of whether or not we need to keep our birth certificate with us or our passport. What is this? This is not our country. It's like, it reminds me of like, so my parents were born here as well, but at some point, right, I grew up with all these friends who every summer they went back to Mexico because their parents came across. And I always thought, man, what is it like? Like, I wonder how bad it was for, Stefan or Rolando's mom to come across. What did they have to leave? And when you hear the stories, and you did hear the stories growing up about the murders, about the stealing of people's property in Mexico because there was lawlessness, you think, God dang, I'm so lucky to not be in that position. But how close are we to that here in this country? I hope we're not that close, but sometimes.
The domino effect can be real, man.
It's fucked up.
There's gonna have to, in my opinion, if I was gonna be this is the most conspiracy brain that I would ever get, but in my opinion, I don't think we would get to that point, because I think the primary focus, I think people are stuck with this like right wing, left wing perspective, right? And right now, when you speak about ICE and like the craziness that's happening, yeah, it feels a lot more like right wing, left wing perspective, and I get that. But the like final boss is the oligarchy versus the working class. I think the oligarchy they'll throw us bones. They'll throw people, because if for some reason there is lawlessness, they will actually lose more money. You know what I mean? And I don't think that they will let it happen. You know what I mean? So I think what will happen is they will spend an enormous amount of money to elect a left-leaning president for 8 to 12 years, and then they'll keep flipping back and forth, and that'll be a conversation for a critique of like corporate Democrats versus actual progressive left-leaning policies, and even a critique for corporate Republicans and actual libertarian policies. But I could do this all day, because this to me, it's incredible how clear-headed you can be when you have the luxury of time and not having to survive, and you can just read a little bit about what it means to like what Congress is supposed to do, a little bit of history on the stuff that this government and this country has already done, and like how they finessed it, and the real influencers that have really made certain things happen. The fact that there was money behind the civil rights movement, a lot of it was Jewish money. The fact that there was a lot of the fact that there was an end to slavery, but it was more an appeasement because it was an economic crisis, at large in general. The fact that there was like Latinos in, fighting for the Union and fighting for the Confederacy. The fact that had it not been for Mexico winning the war that they had against France, then France would have probably helped the Confederacy, and they probably would have won the Civil War. So I mean, there's so many things that like you open up a book and you just kind of see a little bit of what's going on, or what had happened, and you're like, man, that's crazy. So you kind of see it. I tend to see things a little bit more clear-headed. Not that I understand it all, but like I see things a little bit more clear. I can talk about what I think the domino effect is going to be, because I've seen it. I've read the history. I kind of see how it ever, and then I plug myself into like, how did that happen in my neighborhood? How did that happen to the people that I care about? How did that happen to the people that I care about, and their grandparents and their great grandparents? And how did that lead me here? How did that create the gentrification problem here? What does that have to? Let's keep pulling it back, and then seeing like, and then more importantly, proactively speaking, what can we do right now that would allow for that not to happen again? What would have been? Okay, so then you go back and you'd be like, well, it would have been great if the Tulsa, Oklahoma, massacre didn't happen, so Black Wall Street could have stayed afloat because they were on the right track. Yeah. So how do you make sure that you learn from that mistake? You know what I mean? It would have been great if a form of reparations that happened to Black Americans after the Civil War would have been equity, or would have been the ability to create businesses, and it didn't have to be actual liquid cash. We're not having conversations about like, yes, let's put $30,000 in your pocket and yes, acabó, like you go stop complaining. It could have been a way to like have some sort of subsidy or tax-free, a tax-free haven for the next 150 years. I don't know, something. It could have been something. Is the point, right? Land back. You could get some of that land back, and some sort of like government amendment initiative that said that land is tax-free, and for forever or whatever, right? Where like they had a benefit there that could have given them some sort of a foundation and for lack of a better term, not a head start, but a supplementation back to zero.
Back up.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
And I say supplementation back to zero because they were starting below zero, right?
Yep.
And nobody's asking for a handout past zero. It's, can I just like not have to worry about survival, dude?
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like that we're having two different conversations. Right, like we're having very, very, very different conversations. You come to me and you have a conversation with me about how I want a handout, and I'm like, no. I don't want a handout. That's not what we're asking for. No immigrant, no brown person, no person in this neighborhood that I have ever met has ever asked for a handout because they wanted to be lazy. The hardest working people that I have ever met have all been in this neighborhood right here, just behind us, just the miles down all the way to the ship channel. These are the hardest working people that I have ever met. They don't know how to retire. They don't know how to stop working. These are the hardest working people that I have ever met. They have never asked for a handout. The only thing that they have ever taken, if it was WIC or food stamps or Medicaid or whatever it is that they needed to get back to zero. Getting back to zero and asking for 10 are two very different things. A handout is getting bailed out in the mortgage crisis in '08 because you don't understand how to take the L.
Yeah,
Start another business.
Exactly.
And also some of y'all need to go to jail
Yeah.
because what y'all were doing was incredibly predatory.
And nobody did except for one guy, Credit Suisse, which is horrible. Like
yeah, so not that's a sidebar.
Yeah,
but
sorry.
but
Yeah.
but like that's the real handout.
Yeah,
you know
for
what I
sure.
mean? We have social democracy for oligarchs, for tech giants, but we don't have social democracy
Kind of like what I was saying,
for
like
culture.
when it's for the poor, it's one thing.
Yeah.
When it's for the rich, something totally different.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. What are your biggest concerns over the next? Because this bill is affecting funding overall, and you worked in some of these spaces. So what's your biggest concern overall?
We have a healthcare company called Orders. We provide a software that helps connect labs to results. Right? If you got a result during the pandemic for COVID, our software was pushing results out to cell phones and out to customers. And today, we're very fortunate that our lab testing software isn't really built around it's not heavily one thing. So we have what's called a payer mix, right? And every hospital has a payer mix where, it's either Medicare, Medicaid, and then private money or private insurance, right? With us, we're not heavily on Medicare or Medicaid. We're kind of a mix. And so we feel like we're kind of, for lack of better terms, diversified. And so we feel okay on that side. However, when you talk about healthcare in general, I also have an investment in a healthcare startup that is telemedicine for Spanish-speaking communities. They're more skewed towards Medicare, Medicaid. And they do a lot of business out in California, and California is a big state that depends. I mean, I forget the numbers, but I think it's something like 40% of residents depend on Medicare or Medicaid, one of those. And that will have impacts for us in that business. And we have to now adapt as a company to figure out how will we survive, but how will we continue to serve our customers? It's one thing to make money, but we're invested in the lives of thousands of Californians and Texans and Washingtonians. Like, we're in multiple states. And so we have to figure that out. For me, I'm as an investor, I have the luxury of just getting the investor report, although I do help out the company with several things here and there, but I'm not making those decisions. I'm hoping and praying, and I'm talking and communicating with the team to know what decisions they're making to strategize around this. But what I do know is that as a society, it says something about us for how we treat our most vulnerable. And when it comes to healthcare, already we were not treating our most vulnerable very well.
Right.
And so to see this kind of cuts and these kind of cuts in funding for our most vulnerable populations, it is a watershed moment. We're in uncharted territory, quite frankly. So I think I'm going to support my companies and these initiatives and whatever decisions they make. But if I haven't had time really to sit down and think of, and I don't think anybody has a perfect strategy around it, but what is our course correction and what is this new world that we're entering where we're not seeing as much funding, and how will we help those customers and those patients now with less funding, quite frankly. So easier said than done, and still a problem to be solved right now.
That's tragic.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
Uncharted territories feels like the right terminology for the kind of like world that we're stepping into. I believe in people, so I in the same way that I can talk about my neighborhood in a nostalgic way, where I can take out all of, like, talking about the smell of the coffee in the morning, and in the same way that I can talk about that and get poetic about it, I believe that people will be, the spirit and the culture and the beauty of people is going to live on regardless. But I'm also not naive enough with that statement, that I don't know that there's going to be some suffering that's going to happen.
I think I share a similar sentiment of, like, whenever we're in, we grew up in basically the same part of town. So, like, I love talking about the East End in these beautiful nostalgic ways of, like, we didn't just build the East End. We laid the tracks. We dredged the port. I mean, my grandfather literally in the 40s came to Houston because he got a job as a welder on the ships. And I think about all the people in the East End. We didn't just build the East End, we built this city. This city would not have the prosperity that it experienced in the last 100 years had it not been for the people who laid down roots in this
That's a whole episode in and of itself. We could do a timeline of, like, why the East End is like probably the most important part of Houston history, or the people in there, which were predominantly Hispanics and Latinos.
Oh yeah, but I bring it up because, I do have this sort of, like, faith, if you will, this hope that we've seen this before in some sense, right? They told us to do things a certain way, and then we did it, a little bit of progress, and they changed the rules. Whether that's the redlining, whether that's the civil rights movement, whether that's Brown versus Board of Education, like gerrymandering. I think our people, and I think I'm speaking for both black and brown here, this is not the first time we've had the rug pulled out from underneath us or been faced with this situation where we feel like our back's up against the wall. I'm not, like you said, I don't think it's, for me, I don't think I want to say it's naivete, but I think it's like, it's not blind hopeless. It's not blind hope. It's this hope that we're going to chart our way out of this. But the thing I have to be real about is that in the interim, it's going to suck.
Yeah, there's going to be some discomfort.
Absolutely. And so that is where I am. If I'm grinning and bearing it, because the bearing it part is knowing that we haven't even felt the immediate impacts, and the impacts, like you said, 5-6 years from now, we haven't even felt that yet. It's just days fresh. But there's still hope. And the work now is to figure out how we address the things we can address, how we can be proactive in the face of all this, getting organized, and understanding that we can't do everything. We can't boil the ocean. We can't be everywhere. So where am I going to fight? And I think that for sure, Magnolia Fund, generational wealth, trying to educate our community on what it means to be an owner and to be able to have some control of your own destiny when it comes to that. What else can I do? And I think I'm going to continue to focus on advocacy that helps, helps our communities in some way. But there's going to be other fights out there, and there's going to be other people that are going to have to step up.
Can't boil the ocean. It's a great way to think about it. On the other side, also don't treat dandruff with decapitation. You know what I mean? So, like, don't, Yeah, don't expect to do something grandiose, but then also don't make rash decisions.
Totally.
You know what I mean? So if you had some advice, what would you? Because I'm gonna blast this to
Yeah.
as many people as possible. Hopefully, a lot of people in this community get to get to see it, get to take a listen to what we're saying, and then maybe get enlightened into some things that they're curious about. Maybe come talk to you or message me about it. What's some advice that you have for people out there, whether it's in this community, the Latino Hispanic community, young people in general? Like we can close off with a little bit of hope there.
Yeah, I'll just say I had an exit interview recently with one of the folks we brought on for Magnolia Fund.
Yeah.
It was a short-lived career with us, but they were there long enough for me to tell them this exit interview is more about you understanding who I am than me giving you some little feedback on your performance while you were with us. And what I told this person was, when I first started my career, I actually was involved with a civil rights case for 6 years. And for that 6 years, it really shaped who I was. I learned a lot about being a part of the legal system. I was in handcuffs. It started with me being in handcuffs. And we can go on and on about this, but I'll just briefly kind of cover it. I learned that, and by the way, I don't have a criminal record. I've never, been convicted of anything. But it was a false arrest. It almost turned into me having a record. It ended up being a 6-year battle with the county and 14 other individuals, police officers, because of the way my brother and I were mistreated in our own home. We settled with the county. But in that process, and for years after that, I learned that as a people, sometimes we get caught in this thing that we call the justice system or the legal system.
Yeah.
And we feel that there's no way out. We feel we don't have resources. You have to talk. Just don't stop talking to people until you find the resources you need. If you're innocent, prove your innocence, fight to the death. Because at one point during this whole thing, my brother was given the option to just say you're guilty.
Yeah.
And we'll give you a $1 fine. And if he had done that, we would have never, this was early in this process, we would have never gone through that civil rights case because we would have had a record and we would have never been able to fight like we did. And, my mom begged him to take it so we could be done with it. When you get tempted by the system to say, hey, you can be done, it's $1. Don't sell yourself short. Don't make a deal with the devil, right? Fight.
If you're not guilty.
If you're not guilty. If you're guilty, good luck.
Yeah.
But don't make it, so,
If you're guilty, get a lawyer.
Yeah, totally. But, yeah, get a lawyer no matter what,
Yeah.
right? So a little bit of my career, I'll sum it up like this: in the legal field and understanding what the justice system really means for people like us. That day that those police officers came to our home, I was setting up a software in my computer for a business plan software, and I've always been in tech, and so I feel like in tech and in healthcare, I've seen some amazing aspects of that, and I've seen the ugly side of it as well. And I think from a healthcare perspective, I also had a heart event, right? And knowing that you have to be your own advocate at all paths and at all times in your health. That's another sort of, again, this could be its own little episode, but remember that in healthcare or in your career, you have to be your own advocate. Standing up for yourself, like I tell people all the time, my dad taught me how to fight, my mom taught me how to defend myself. Mm-hmm. And that plays a role in both healthcare and in tech. You got to advocate for yourself. So be that advocate, because no one's going to come in and save you, right? And then the last thing I'll say is from a financial perspective, there's always a way to protect you and the future of your family. And ask somebody, again, advocate on behalf of yourself, talk to people. Don't just take the first thing people are trying to give you. Try to protect yourself. So when it comes to the legal system, when it comes to your career, when it comes to your finances, self-advocacy is going to be the number one thing, and just talking to as many people as you can. There are times where I told my wife before, I used to be in a position where I couldn't afford the discount. And what that means is you go to Costco, yeah, you're going to get a discount if you buy 30 rolls of toilet paper, 30 boxes of toilet paper. But when you're poor, you can't afford the discount. You can't afford to even buy the 4-pack soap because it's too expensive. You're buying one soap because that's only a portion of your pay. My biggest advice, and this is somebody who's been as poor can be, and at the same time experience great success, you're always going to feel like you're not there yet or you haven't done enough. Take time to take care of your health. It's the one thing that, my mom would say, we're juggling all these different aspects of life, your career, your family, your health. The only one that's made of glass is your family and your health. You lose that, it doesn't bounce back up. You drop that one, it doesn't bounce back up. And mental health has been proven time and time again to be that factor that can dictate some of your physical health. And so take care of yourself from a healthcare perspective, from a mental health perspective, talk to people, make sure that you're realizing when you need help. And so the biggest thing I can say is take care of yourself from a healthcare perspective, from a mental health perspective, and remember that when your back's up against the wall, there is a way out. There's always a way. It has to be by talking to people and telling people where you're at and being completely vulnerable. It's okay to be vulnerable. In our culture, I think it's hard for us to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
But be vulnerable.
To piggyback off of that, I'm going to just double down on what I was saying earlier. If you're out there, it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, how young you are, how old you are, take as much time as you can out of your busy day. Take as much time as you can out of your crazy hectic schedule, and do your very best to educate yourself in any aspect of anything that's happening in your life that you feel is important. If you're right now getting heavily impacted by our political climate and how much immigration is a big part of the public discourse, then educate yourself on what that means. You don't have to be a lawyer to understand all of those things. You don't have to be in politics to understand any of those things. Just do your best to understand all the nooks and crannies. It's a lot. I know it's a lot. It's a lot of information and things are confusing, but just keep asking questions, keep learning about it, because it could be the difference between you falling victim to a scare tactic and you understanding that there are certain things, certain rights that you have, and certain things that you are already there that are non-negotiable. And understand that, at least in my end, in my opinion, understand that even though you feel hopeless or that you don't have a voice or a say in some of these big capital letter problems, capital I immigration problem, capital P poverty problem, capital G gentrification problem. That problem is not a singular problem. It is a big culmination of all of these things that are morphed together and mutated into itself into a very specific way. And you're not going to be able to one person dismantle the whole thing. What you are going to be able to do is be a prong in a solution that has a lot of aspects to it also. So if you're out there and you're an artist, make art. If you are out there and you're a good activist and you have leadership roles you have leadership skills that where you can get people together, people trust you, don't abuse that and become and advocate for your community, for yourself, for the people that look like you. If you are great in school and you find that you really enjoy the legal process, become a lawyer. If you have to pay your dues and be a corporate lawyer for a while and then come back home and advocate for your neighbors, go do that. You can be a huge asset, whether it's pro bono or whether it's not, or whether it's a firm here or whether it's immigration specific or whatever. You will be part of that system. If you need to learn how to be a CEO somewhere so that you can come back and mentor small businesses, then go and do that. You can be a prong in a big system that can help, and it's going to feel overwhelming, but we need people in our community that know what it's like to be in healthcare, know what it's like to be nurses, that know what it's like to kind of live in that field. We need lawyers, we need mental health service providers, we need to break down stigmas, we need to advocate for each other, we need to build our women up and our men up, we need to understand how all of this works for the revolving door of pain like I was talking about. So I would say that even if you feel hopeless or like you can't do anything about it, you can be a small window of opportunity and a small window of knowledge and a small window or small ray of light for a very specific niche that you may be good at, even if it doesn't come with a huge financial paycheck, or even if it's a side thing, or even if it's whatever it is, you can do it. So I encourage you to do it, because we need it. The only way that communities like this, or communities all across the country, whether it's Filipino communities, Hmong communities, African communities, Haitian communities, it doesn't matter. The only way that those communities are going to be able to pick themselves up and thrive and activate the potential of the entire demographic is if the people in those communities do their part, and sometimes that means picking up the slack where the government will refuse to.
Absolutely. I got to mention the one thing you brought up real quick. It's this homecoming effect. And our fund is filled with investors who went away to Silicon Valley for 20 years, or they spent their time in nonprofits, right? Or their last even 10 years working for a civil engineering company, right? They come back to the neighborhood, and then they're putting that work into being part of this, like Mason Park Conservancy. I'm on the board there. There's literally a guy who's a civil engineer. Like, he's using his expertise. And so one thing I will say about this next generation, if you're early in your career, realize that what you're working on right now could be that mission critical thing that people are going to need back home, or maybe even next month, that only you can provide, and you might be in that place to do it.
Soak up all that information.
Oh, absolutely.
Soak up all that information,
Absolutely.
and then just do your best to not get jaded with the world, but then also do your best to not fall victim to the fact that just because you're successful and just because you're good at something doesn't mean you should assume that everybody is as lucky or as fortunate or as capable as you. Yeah. There's some people with some shitty circumstances out there, and those people are just as valuable and just as important. Just don't forget where you come from, man. Like, everything.
I was just gonna say, it's totally okay to work for the man, because you know you're loyal to your hood. You know you're loyal to your home.
Yeah.
Like, there are people that are coming back and they're telling me, like, oh man, look, actually, with this investment, you can do this. Or did you know that there's this subsidies or these incentives if you're doing a thing that's on the light rail or whatever. Like, we have some amazing people that I think once you've spent some time working for the man, all you want to do is find purpose in your work. And so you're willing to, like, take all that expertise and that learning and create more value for the people that are like you or that come from where you come from. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing.
Well, thank you guys for watching. I know that this conversation, part of it was about society at large and, our country at large and community in general as a concept, but it was also about a very specific part of Houston. So if you're a Houstonian and you frequent the east side a lot, just know that there's a lot of there's a lot of culture and a lot of history here. If you come to Edo to party, keep partying, but just know that you're contributing to this side of town and its history. If you live on this side of town, because I know there's some of you out there that watch this that live on this side of town, become an advocate for your community. Figure out how you can get in contact with the Magnolia Fund and other resources that are around here. I know, again, we had a big conversation about gentrification, and it is happening. This neighborhood is changing a lot, but it doesn't mean that you have no say. So all the way down to voting, to your local elections, which in my opinion are some of the most important, not just the 4-year propaganda war. So please, figure out how it is that you can, be part of these conversations with the school board and with the local elections and town halls and, all of that jazz. If you found any of this information helpful or insightful, please do some research. Contact my friend Eric here. Contact me. We'll gladly help you, or at least point you in the right direction. Because ultimately we're talking about people that look like us, that live in the places where we live, that contribute to the memories and the nostalgia that we all have. So in honor of that, thank you for watching. Until next time, hopefully next time will be a little bit more shit talking and some fun conversations. I'll try to make it fun, but this one was for the books. This one's for the For the barrio, for sure. So until next time, thank you so much. Please like, share, subscribe. Remember, we are 100% self-funded. So any like, any subscription, any follow goes a long way into making sure that we can continue doing this for all of you guys and keep, you know, creating some great conversations. So thank you in advance. Have a great day. This is the 4th, so happy 4th for whatever that's worth. Until next time, see ya.